Absolutely. This is a super important concept. I've been thinking a lot about it for a long time, but the person who kind of like formalized that way of thinking was co-founder Mike Johnson. He wrote an amazing book called Principia Qualia in 2015. I recommend reading it. It's really good philosophy. And he defines this concept of qualia formalism. So qualia formalism is, okay, not only is qualia real, is the paint of our subjective experience, but more so for any, given system that is generating an experience, what qualia formalism says is that there will correspond a mathematical object such that the features of that object are map onto or isomorphic to the features of our experience. In other words, that you can, in some way, find a mathematical model such that your experience right now is a configuration of that model in such a way that by analyzing the mathematical features of that mathematical model, you will infer things such as, are you feeling cold? Are you feeling warm? Do you feel like time is moving really fast? And things like that. And more concretely, like applied to kind of like one of the areas that we are really interested in, kind of like if you zoom in within qualia formalism, then we have valence structuralism, which is the idea that what makes an experience feel good or bad is one of those features, is one of those kind of mathematical structures within an experience.
So basically, someone could look at their equation and understand more about their experience than perhaps they do today.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And you would probably figure out things about your experience that you're not even able to attend to, but they're actually real and are modifying your experience. But it's something that you can really only kind of like infer with one of these methods.
So I guess like a kind of key question that I have here is like, what have you learned about from a mathematical perspective or from a scientific perspective, what makes for a high quality experience, a high quality subjective experience of consciousness?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are various ways of answering these. And I would say what we focus on at QRI is the most kind of like fundamental way of tackling this question, which is really, okay, like what features of experience make the experience feel good or bad, which is, I should, as a preamble, it's just such a different way of thinking about the problem, because when people think about, okay, what makes for a happy experience, they think of external conditions, right? Like they think of, it's very true, like the five, most important things, which are like, diet, exercise, sleep, social interactions, and stress levels. Well, and then you can add also air quality. And okay, there you got like, okay, 6 factors that predict very, very highly your level of well-being. But those are kind of like very indirect, right? Like those are modulating internal systems, but then the actual feeling of happiness, the actual feeling of joy is a configuration inside. In neuroscience, they might focus on, for example, mainstream neuroscience, they might focus on neurotransmitter systems. They might say something like, oh, like dopamine, serotonin concentrations, endogenous opioid concentrations, that's kind of like what modulates happiness, the fundamental nature of happiness. Or they might say something like, oh no, it has to do with functional localization. There is such a thing as the pleasure centers. And when you modulate the pleasure centers, that is what gives rise to, joy and happiness. But as far as we, read that literature at QRI, we make sense of it as, hey, these are correlates. These are things that are highly correlated with positive mood, but they're not themselves positive mood. They're things that are mediating or conditioning it. So what we have learned is that a very, 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 very key feature that makes an experience feel good is coherence and phase locking between coupled oscillators in your nervous system. The most extreme versions of this are the jhanas and some drugs like 5-MeO-DMT, which generate kind of like this state of hypercoherence across many different frequencies. And there's many pieces of evidence I could provide kind of like for arguing for this perspective, both neurological as well as phenomenological. Um, but it really, really does seem that like really peak experiences, like the most beautiful, mystical, mind blowing experiences, tend to involve extreme levels of coherence such that waves can travel in a very linear way without resistance. So you feel kind of this like very clean resonant chamber without distortions, without
Mm.
imperfections or defects. It's just like very smooth geometry. That's usually what feels very good.